Captain Midnight.
This video will feature full spoilers. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is a pretty good movie. That's both a compliment and not really what I wanted to be saying about it. I was hoping it'd be great, that it would tower over most of the rest of Phase 4 with ease. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think it does. Now this may seem like a harsh start to a review of a movie that I mostly liked, but the more I thought about it, the more it did seem like an appropriate way to begin. This is a mixed bag of a film, but the highs I do really think are pretty high. I want to go over the good, the bad, and where I think this movie succeeds the most.
You have chosen poorly.
Now, I've already mentioned Phase 4, but I did also want to take this movie on its own terms. As I'm sure anyone watching is well aware, the tragic death of Chadwick Boseman meant a lot of changes would be necessary to the story of this one, and I think the film handles that particular aspect of it about as well as it could. Its tribute to Boseman is powerful and handled with a lot of care and respect. Now, the first Black Panther film had a great supporting cast as well, and most of them, minus Daniel Kaluuya, reprised their roles here. Above all though, this is Wright's movie, as Shuri emerges as the de facto lead of the film and the new Black Panther. Wright and Angela Bassett get a lot of time to shine here, and I think for the most part, they make the most of it. I thought Shuri's journey was handled well. It made sense that she would feel so uncomfortable with the mantle of the Black Panther and everything it represents. She's someone who has spent all of her time shying away from the spiritual aspects of Wakandan life. Now here she is, being thrust into one of their oldest and most spiritual traditions. And I liked the touch that the only way she could reconnect with that after Killmonger burned all the herbs was to use her skill with technology to find a new way to that ancestral plane. I thought that was some well-crafted screenwriting, having Shuri take up the mantle but on her own terms and using the skills she possesses to do so. Creating a bridge between the worlds of tradition and science that felt like a big moment for the character. I think the movie is at its best when it's grappling with Wakanda itself. The loss of T'Challa and how that sets up other countries to view Wakanda as vulnerable. Couple that with the friction between Shuri, the Queen, and M'Baku, it's more than enough to base a whole movie around. And I think the film works well when it maintains its focus on those elements. I loved that scene between Shuri and the Queen, where they're just sitting next to the water and the elephants and having a conversation. And then Namor shows up and we have to get into the actual plot mechanics of the film, and at least for me, it got a little less interesting. That's not to say I hated Namor here, he's fine, but I gotta be honest, as someone who loves the old Submariner comics, I'm a little sad we didn't get the more brutal, vengeful Namor I like so much. In the flashbacks we do, but present day Namor just seems a little too calm and reasonable. He doesn't feel as dangerous and especially as unpredictable as I was hoping. Again, he's fine, but that Namor fury I was looking forward to, there's just not enough of it in this performance. You know what there's far too much of though? All the American characters. Ross, Riri Williams, Valentina. Look, nothing against these actors, but Winston Duke and the rest of M'Baku's tribe have so little to work with in this movie that it just seems like a huge missed opportunity. Like, Wakanda is in constant turmoil throughout the film, losing 2 leaders and being attacked in its capital city. But when the movie makes Riri Williams the human MacGuffin of the film, suddenly we have to take this long detour to the US and introduce her and reintroduce the agents. Honestly, this is where the movie was losing me. Wakanda Forever has a lot going on. It's one of the longest Marvel movies ever, it's got a big cast to juggle, and I just felt like all these American characters could have been lifted straight out of the movie, and while obviously some plot mechanics would have to be changed around, it would make it a tighter film and probably a better experience. It's frustrating to feel that the film is overlong and has pacing issues, while also feeling like some of the more interesting Wakandan characters, like M'Baku and Nakia, have very little to do. Now what they do have, I like quite a bit. That conversation before the battle between Shuri and M'Baku, right after she became the Black Panther, is one of my favorites of the film. It's just disappointing that so much of the runtime feels devoted to a new character whose presence feels pretty inconsequential in the third act, and the CIA characters. I love Martin Freeman and Julia Louis-Dreyfus as actors, but they're given such flat and boring material here. Maybe it all just came down to how many days some of the actors were available, but I would have much rather the movie have used that time to give more dimension to Nakia or M'Baku's storylines. That's especially frustrating in Riri Williams' case, because while her existence is very important to the plot, her actual choices as a character really aren't. She's whisked around from location to location, getting a lot of screen time that, again, felt like it could have been used to better effect elsewhere. Like, there's just so many characters to service here, and it felt like a lot of time was spent setting up a Disney Plus show instead, which is just frustrating. Oh, and while I'm being negative, I thought both Ironheart's suit and those Midnight Angels costumes looked really bad. That's a minor aside, but I just had to get it out. Anyway, back to the positives, I do think the war between Namor's people and Wakanda was a really compelling premise here. And while the usual Marvel third act battle set piece is definitely in play, it's elevated by a couple of things. One is that director Ryan Coogler brings a lot of visual flair to the table, but more importantly, at least for me, is that there is more at stake here than just Shuri defeating Namor. Now, I'm not going to pretend her overcoming her lust for vengeance was some shocking development or anything. I mean, this is a Marvel movie. I wasn't expecting the new Black Panther to just brutally murder the guy. But the choice was set up effectively. The scenes with Killmonger were a welcome surprise, and I thought they cemented Shuri's choice really well. So while I think this movie did manage to avoid the third act problems of its predecessor, I don't think I quite liked it as much as the first Black Panther. For one, I don't think Namor is as compelling here as Killmonger was. And the script is a lot more cluttered. Because, like I mentioned, this is a long movie, and at least for me, I felt every minute of it too. Still, the film never managed to fully lose me, I think in large part due to just how strong this cast is. Under all the bombast, this is clearly a movie about grief, and it features a cast that's more than up to the task of delivering on that. When the movie allowed itself to linger in those moments and those conversations, I felt like it was accomplishing everything it set out to do. But when it had to actually go through the mechanics of being an MCU movie, maybe not so much. That's not to say I didn't want any of the action here. I enjoyed a lot of it, and like I said, I think the general concept of Wakanda being attacked while in the middle of this crisis of leadership is a really good one. I especially liked that Namor actually had a solid reason for his actions here. This conflict over vibranium, it's not the most complex thing in the world, but it gives Namor a motive that makes sense and a perspective that's understandable, rising above the usual superhero movie thing of, I'm evil for evil's sake, and also here's an army of faceless monsters I brought with me for you guys to fight. I did appreciate that a lot, and I think it ended up saving Namor as a character for me. Wakanda Forever does a lot right. Overall, I liked it, but I'm not quite sure it lives up to the promise of that great first trailer. I know Phase 4 technically isn't over yet, there's still that Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special, but in terms of actual movies, we're at the end of the road. And that road, it's been more than a little bumpy. Still, in terms of the films, at least Wakanda Forever managed to send it out on a reasonably high note. Like a lot of Phase 4, it felt a little bloated and a bit unfocused, but when it leans on the strengths of its ensemble cast, it worked just as well as I'd hoped. The post-credit scene sets up that T'Challa had a son he kept secret. This seems like it'll really complicate things for M'Baku, who ends the film poised to take the throne. But when I think about this movie a year from now, I doubt it'll be any of the big reveals or plot mechanics that I'm thinking about. It'll be the performances, the quiet moments between these characters. That's where the final two scenes shine through, and I think where the movie works best. And I think taken as a whole, that's enough. But I want to know what you think. Did you like Wakanda Forever? Did you prefer it to the first one? Or did it come up short for you? Oh, and if you liked this video, liking it and especially sharing it would definitely help. I'll be back with a new video next week, but in the meantime, I'm really interested to see what you all have to say about this one.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.